Imagine being a princess, locked in a golden cage, married off to a man you've never met, who could be executed the moment your brother takes the throne. This was the nightmare reality for Ottoman princesses, and their wedding nights. That was just the beginning of their prison sentence. Now, before we dive into this absolutely heartbreaking story, let me tell you something wild. Most people think being a princess in the Ottoman Empire meant luxury, power, and freedom. But here's the truth that historians tried to bury for centuries. These women lived in what scholars call the golden cage, and their wedding day was the day the cage door slammed shut forever. I spent weeks digging through Ottoman archives and historical accounts for this video, and what I found genuinely shocked me. So stick with me here, because this gets darker than you'd think. Let's start with how Ottoman princesses got married, because this alone will make your skin crawl. Unlike European royalty who married other royals to strengthen alliances, Ottoman sultans had a very different strategy. They married their daughters and sisters to their own government officials, specifically, to men they could control. And I'm not talking about choice here. The Sultan would literally summon a high-ranking official and say, "Congratulations, you're marrying my daughter next week." According to historian Leslie Pierce in The Imperial Harem, these weren't proposals, they were commands. The groom couldn't refuse. The princess definitely couldn't refuse. And here's the kicker, the age gap was often absolutely insane. We're talking about teenage princesses being married off to men in their 40s, 50s, sometimes even 60s. Ottoman Princess Fatma Sultan, daughter of Ahmed III, was married 5 times throughout her life. 5 different husbands. And not because she was widowed naturally, but because of political convenience. Each marriage was a chess move by her father and brothers. Now, I know what some of you are thinking, but didn't these princesses have power? They were royalty. Yeah, about that. Let me show you exactly what happened after the wedding ceremony, and you'll understand why this was actually a downgrade from their lives in the palace. But real quick, if you're finding this as fascinating and disturbing as I did, go ahead and hit that like button. We're building a community here of people who want the real stories from history, not the sanitized fairy tales. And trust me, this story gets even more intense. So, the wedding night. Why did they dread it? First, understand this. Ottoman princesses grew up in the imperial harem, which, despite its reputation, was actually more like a finishing school for elite women. Yes, they were secluded, but they were educated, powerful within that space, and respected. Some even wielded significant political influence through their brothers or sons who became sultans. But the moment they married, all that ended. According to the research of historian Tulay Artin, on their wedding night, these princesses were moved from the imperial palace to their husband's residence, and this is where the horror really begins. They went from being imperial princesses, daughters of the Sultan, to being, essentially prisoners in their own marriages. The groom wasn't even chosen for compatibility or love. He was chosen for his usefulness to the Sultan. Grand viziers, military commanders, governors, men whose loyalty needed to be secured. And what better way to secure loyalty than to make someone your son-in-law? Because here's the terrifying part that happened the morning after the wedding night. The morning after the wedding night, the princess's new husband woke up knowing one terrifying fact: his life now depended entirely on staying in the Sultan's good graces. And if the Sultan died and a new one took the throne, his execution could be signed that same day. This wasn't paranoia, this was documented reality. When Sultan Ibrahim I was deposed in 1648, nearly all of his sons-in-law were either executed or exiled within weeks. Historian Caroline Finkel documents in Osman's Dream how the Grand Vizier Kara Mustafa Pasha, who was married to Princess Fatma Sultan, was strangled with a bowstring in 1644 after falling out of favor. His crime? Political disagreement with the Sultan, his own father-in-law. So imagine being that princess. You're lying next to a man on your wedding night, and you both know that his head could literally roll tomorrow. That's not a marriage, that's a hostage situation for both people involved. Now here's where this gets even more twisted, and this is the part that made me actually stop reading and just sit there for a minute. The princesses couldn't even grieve properly when their husbands were executed. You know why? Because mourning too loudly could be seen as political dissent against whoever ordered the execution, often their own brother or father. Princess Bayhan Sultan watched 4 of her husbands either die or get executed throughout her life. 4. And historical records show she just kept getting remarried, over and over, like she was some kind of political bargaining chip. Because that's exactly what she was. But let's talk about the day-to-day reality after that wedding night, because this is where the golden cage really shows its bars. According to the research of historian Pierce and Ottoman court documents, once married, Ottoman princesses faced restrictions that would make your head spin. Number 1, they couldn't leave their husband's residence without explicit permission, not from their husband, but from the Sultan. Their own father or brother had to approve their movements. Number 2, they were cut off from the political intrigue of the palace. Remember, in the imperial harem, these women had access. They could influence decisions, they could whisper in the sultan's ear, they had agency. After marriage? Gone. They became politically neutralized. Number 3, and this is perhaps the cruelest part, they often couldn't even see their own family regularly. Princess Mihrimah Sultan, daughter of Sulaiman the Magnificent, documented in her letters how she desperately missed the daily access to her father after her marriage to Grand Vizier Rustam Pasha. And she was one of the lucky ones, her husband actually accumulated power rather than losing it. But here's what really gets me, these women were given massive dowries, incredible wealth, and multiple estates. On paper, they were rich beyond measure. But what good is wealth when you can't choose where to spend it? When you can't choose where to go? When armed guards follow your every movement? It's like being given $1 million, but being told you can only spend it in one room, and you can never leave that room, and oh, by the way, the room might explode at any moment depending on palace politics. If this is blowing your mind like it blew mine, drop a comment below with the word cage. I want to see how many of you are going down this Ottoman history rabbit hole with me. Because we're about to talk about the children these princesses had, and how even that became another layer of their prison. And if you haven't subscribed yet, just know, this channel is where we dig into the historical stories that textbooks skip over. No fluff, no fairy tales, just the raw, unfiltered truth. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next one. So we've established that these princesses went from influential palace women to basically house arrest after marriage. But it gets worse when they had children, because the Ottoman succession system meant that their own sons could become threats to the throne. Let me explain how motherhood became yet another nightmare for these women. So let's talk about what happened when these princesses had children, because this is where the tragedy reaches a whole new level. If you had a daughter, congratulations, you just condemned another girl to the exact same fate you're living. You'd watch your daughter grow up knowing she'd eventually be married off to some government official she'd never met, just like you were. You were literally raising the next generation of golden cage prisoners. But if you had a son, that was somehow even more dangerous. Here's why, Ottoman princesses' sons were called Sultanzade, meaning son of a sultan's daughter. And while they weren't in the direct line of succession, they still had royal blood. According to historian Gunhan Bareksi's research, this made them potential rallying points for rebellions or coups. Their very existence was a political threat. Princess Safiye Sultan's grandson, Said Mustafa, was executed in 1553 partly because of concerns about his growing power base. His own royal blood, the thing that should have protected him, became his death sentence. Imagine being his mother or grandmother, watching your own bloodline become your family's executioners. Let me give you a specific example that really drives this home, Princess Mihrimah Sultan, daughter of Sulaiman the Magnificent. Now, Mihrimah was actually one of the more fortunate ones. She was married to Rustam Pasha, who became Grand Vizier and stayed in power. But her letters, which have been preserved and studied by historians like Pierce, reveal something heartbreaking. She wrote about feeling torn between loyalty to her husband and loyalty to her brother, Said Bayezid, when palace politics turned them against each other. In one letter, she describes the pain of knowing that any word she spoke could result in someone's death. She couldn't be a neutral daughter, sister, or wife, she was always a political piece on someone else's chessboard. And when her beloved father Suleiman died in 1566, she lost her primary protector. Her new sultan brother, Selim too, didn't trust her the same way. The influence she once had started evaporating. She went from being one of the most powerful women in the empire to just another widow trying to survive palace politics. But you want to know who really had it terrible? Let me tell you about Princess Fatma Sultan, daughter of Ahmed III. This woman was married 5 times. 5 different husbands. Not because she was a black widow or anything dramatic like that, but because Ottoman politics kept killing or disposing of her husbands. Her first husband, Ali Pasha, was executed in 1716. Executed. She was remarried within months to another official. That husband died. She was remarried again. That one was dismissed and exiled, political reasons. She was remarried again. According to Ottoman court records studied by historian Tuli Arden, Fatma Sultan essentially lived her entire adult life in a cycle of wedding ceremonies and funeral preparations. She never got to just be married. She never got stability. Every wedding night was a reminder that this man, too, would probably be gone within a few years. And the darkest part? She couldn't even say no. Each time, the Sultan, her father, then later her brothers, would simply inform her of her next marriage. Fatma, you're getting married again next month. That was it. That was her life. Now, we don't have tons of first-person accounts from these princesses because, shocker, they weren't exactly free to write whatever they wanted. But the letters and documents that do survive paint a picture of incredible psychological suffering. Princess Esma Sultan, in the 18th century, had documented bouts of severe depression. Court physicians recorded treating her for what they called melancholy, which, let's be honest, was probably clinical depression caused by her completely powerless situation. Another princess, Hadai Sultan, was described by French ambassador Comte de Ferriol as appearing perpetually anxious and never at ease, even in her own home. He noted that she would constantly look to her attendants before answering even basic questions, as if afraid her own words might get someone killed. These women lived in constant fear. Fear that their husband would be executed. Fear that their sons would become political targets. Fear that saying the wrong thing at the wrong time could trigger a cascade of violence. Their wedding night wasn't just the start of a marriage, it was the start of a lifetime of walking on eggshells made of literal life and death stakes. Now, I want to be fair here and talk about the exceptions, because not every Ottoman princess lived in complete misery. There were a few, and I mean a few, who managed to carve out some power and agency despite the system. The most famous exception is probably Kozum Sultan, though technically she started as a concubine, not a born princess. But there were born princesses who fought back too. Princess Bayhan Sultan, despite her 4 dead husbands, actually accumulated significant wealth and used it to commission public works, fountains, mosques, charitable institutions. In her later years as a widow, she apparently told a European visitor, according to historical accounts, that she preferred widowhood to marriage because, at least now my time is my own. Think about that. She preferred being widowed, preferred being alone, over being married. Because marriage meant control. Widowhood meant freedom. Princess Esma Sultan, who I mentioned earlier, actually managed to wield some influence during the Tulip period in the early 1700s. She hosted salons, patronized artists, and essentially created a small sphere of cultural influence. But even then, she could only do this as a widow. While married, she had nowhere near that freedom. So why did the Ottomans do this? Why did they treat their own daughters and sisters this way? The answer is brutally practical: political control. By marrying princesses to government officials, the Sultan accomplished several things at once. 1. He created family ties that theoretically ensured loyalty. 2. He elevated certain officials while keeping them dependent on royal favor. 3. He prevented princesses from forming independent power bases or foreign alliances like European royalty did. Historian Finkel argues in her work that this system actually helped maintain Ottoman stability for centuries. By neutralizing the political power of women born into the dynasty, the Ottomans avoided the succession disasters that plagued some European monarchies where rival branches of the royal family fought for the throne. But here's the thing, it worked as a political system. It did what it was designed to do. But it did it by turning human beings, specifically, women, into political tools. Into chess pieces. Into prisoners in golden cages. And before you think, well, that was just how things were back then, let me push back on that a little bit. Because even by the standards of their own time, this system was extreme. European princesses of the same era often had more say in their marriages. Yes, they were still political arrangements, but there was typically negotiation, contracts, the possibility of refusal in some cases. Catherine the Great literally overthrew her husband and became Empress of Russia. Elizabeth I of England never married at all, specifically to maintain her power. Ottoman princesses didn't have those options. The system was designed to ensure they never would. And what's really interesting is that by the 19th century, as the Ottoman Empire started modernizing and adopting some Western practices, you start seeing pushback. The last Ottoman princesses, in the early 1900s, began refusing arranged marriages, demanding education, even pushing for divorce rights. Princess Ayşe Sultan, one of the last imperial princesses before the empire fell, actually divorced her husband in 1923, something that would have been absolutely unthinkable 200 years earlier. The golden cage was finally starting to crack. So, why did Ottoman princesses dread their wedding night? Because it represented the end of whatever limited freedom they had. It was the moment they went from being people with at least some agency within the palace walls to being political hostages in their own marriages. The wedding night wasn't the beginning of their happily ever after, it was the beginning of their sentence. And for many of them, that sentence lasted their entire lives. Through multiple husbands, dead children, palace coups, and political upheavals, these women lived in constant uncertainty, trapped in a system that valued their bloodline but not their humanity. If this video changed how you think about Ottoman history, or royal life in general, do me a favor, hit that like button and drop a comment with your thoughts. I read every single one, and honestly, the conversations in the comments section are sometimes the best part of making these videos. And if you want more deep dives into the dark, hidden corners of history, the stories that don't make it into the textbooks, subscribe to this channel. We're building something special here, a community of people who want the real history, not the sanitized version. I've got more videos coming on Ottoman history, medieval Europe, and other fascinating periods. Trust me, you don't want to miss them. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.